Welcome to Football Podcast with Brandon White
and Robert Thackrey.
Here to discuss all the excitement of Week 1 of the NFL season, to include injuries, which there were a few, upsets, which there were many, and our experience at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes, every of the excitements, every single one of them.
All 7 of the excitements.
To start off with the excitements, David Johnson's wrist got in real big excitement, and now he's going to be out for 2 to 3 months now.
Yeah.
And if you guys have him on your fantasy team, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It sucks.
J.J. Watt broke his finger, and David Johnson was like, "Here, hold my beer." Broke his wrist, because why not, right? So that's a fantasy blowout for a lot of people that drafted first overall. And we had a couple other minor injuries, major injuries. We got AR-15 out for the year, Eric Berry out for the year. Who else got hurt?
Eagles kicker's out for a couple weeks at least. Ronald Darby, the cornerback for the Eagles, is also going to be out with a dislocated ankle, which sounds awful. Like, just to put dislocated and ankle in the same sentence doesn't sound fun at all. So yeah, he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So
the Eagles also gave back the 7th round pick they got for John Dorenbos.
Yeah, because he got medically waived because he needed open heart surgery because of a blood clot or something like that in his chest or in his heart. So that. I mean,
that's what he gets for practicing blood magic.
Possibly trading him saved his life, which is really crazy to think about it when it really comes down to it. So that's exciting. Refs were also back on their bullshit this week, specifically for the Seahawks-Packers game, which they always seem to come out in droves for and just throw crazy flags and make really weird prognostications and other types of calls. But yeah, I mean, it really swung the game. The way that they were calling it really swung the game. And that's not something that I was really happy about. Apart from that, officiating overall that wasn't in that game actually seemed pretty decent. We didn't see any crazy calls of the game we were at live. But that Seahawks-Packers game where they threw out Jeremy Lane for being the defensive guy, because Devontae Adams definitely was the aggressor in that, and they threw him out for throwing a punch
Which the punch wasn't even visible on replay.
No, it was.
It's it didn't really happen.
Utterly ridiculous. They had that, and they had the pick six called back. I mean, that kind of stuff is a momentum swinger, and it's not specifically that did them in. They still had to go through and make plays, and they couldn't put up that many points. They went up. They went into halftime down by 3. So I mean, what are you really going to do?
Yeah.
It's just unfortunate when stuff like that happens, because I mean that changes your whole game plan. You can't just have them throwing out people without specific visible evidence. So
yeah,
that was crappy. That was unfortunate. But apart from that, everything seemed fine. Oh, and the refs called the LA Chargers San Diego, which I got a big LOL out of.
I think we all did. That was great. We were, of course, at the Raiders at Titans game. Only 1 or 2 kind of questionable calls, but nothing egregious. It was a very well officiated game overall.
It was a clean game. I don't think anybody had more than 5 penalties on each side. There was
I think it was
couple offsides and
a
2 or 3 false start or something like that. But yeah,
it was really clean.
It's a really clean game,
and no injuries to speak of, really. Nothing major, at least.
I mean, Seabass is on IR, but that was something we weren't able to cover before. So Thackrey went out there and kicked for y'all.
Yeah, the first time a person not named Janikowski has kicked for the Raiders since 2001.
Yeah, him and Tom Brady are the only 2. Well, maybe not anymore. Seabass is probably on his way out.
Yeah,
but him and Tom Brady are the only ones left from the 2000 class. So that's crazy. They've been in the league for forever.
Yeah, it's really, really wild to think about. A Raiders team without Sebastian Janikowski. But I mean that's the reality of it. You can only have, those core players, those team players that that just scream your team. Like Janikowski, that's a Raider. Gone. So I mean, it's the end of an era, kind of a bummer, but I mean, I guess it could be worse. Kansas City is dealing with Eric Berry, who is the most cursed man alive. He's now had an ACL, a cancer, and an Achilles. So, like, he's the unluckiest millionaire I know of.
Yeah, I mean that's gotta really stink. That's gonna take the wind out of their sails, especially after coming out and just completely stomping the Pats. So right. I don't know what's gonna happen with them. I mean, I figure they're still gonna be really, really set, but I mean Eric Berry really set the tone for that defense. So we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, we were at Nissan Stadium for opening day, first opening day game I had been to, even though it wasn't an Eagles game. But what did you think overall? I mean, of the game, of the stadium, I guess, of the food, seats,
the food,
fans,
the food,
venue overall? But I mean, what did you think?
I can sum this up.
We went in on Paul Brown Stadium last season.
The food was amazing. The women were beautiful. And the stadium overall was impressive. They had free Wi-Fi, which was actually kind of beneficial to like tweet and upload things like as the game was happening.
Check fantasy stats,
stats, like keep connected with all the other things because it was a crazy Sunday. Like the 1:00 games went the hell off, and
there were like 20 of them. So
and if I had one complaint, it's that Nissan Stadium didn't do a very good job of keeping us updated on the other games that were happening. Which I guess it's good because it keeps you immersed in the game that you're in. But it would have been nice to at least been able to have a visual that we didn't have to keep pulling out our phones to look because my phone was overheating from being out in direct sunlight and running and doing things. But overall, it was great. The fans were all pretty cool for the most part. I had one Titans fan flip me off because I was flipping off the stadium for a picture, but I mean he looked like a douchebag anyways. So if you're out there listening to our podcast, douchebag Titans fan, fuck you. I mean, we got the W. You should have just gone home, kept your mouth shut, kept your finger down. But yeah, I mean, it was great. They parked us in a junkyard, which I thought was hilarious.
It's very Raiders.
Yeah, I created the hashtag Trashville for that one, Trashville Titans. But we got to see a lot of great stuff. Like I said, the game was fun. The weather was perfect. I mean, we got scorched. I'm sunburnt all to hell. You're slightly burnt. But I mean, we couldn't ask for much better. It's a much better state. Paul Brown, garbage stadium, garbage fans, garbage team. But Nissan Stadium was actually really nice. The fans were cool, but the food, Jesus Christ! The only thing better than the women was the food. The food was amazing. They had nachos that had pulled pork in it, and like pulled pork sandwiches and a prime rib sandwich. Even the hot dog was really good. Like, everything was just great. The food was amazing. Beer could have been a little bit cheaper, but, I mean, nothing to complain. Like, I enjoyed it. I would go to another game there in, like, October, when it would be just, like, a little cooler, maybe.
Yeah.
So we don't, like, die of the heat. 'Cause I know you were roasting. You were wearing a Black Raiders jersey, and you were just miserable. But I was very pleased with my experience, so thank you. Big thank you to the city of Trashville, Tennessee, for hosting us, and all of Raider Nation showing up. It was great. Like, the fans, like, this is the first time either of us have gotten to see Raiders fans live, tailgating, doing their thing, and it was a spectacle. It was very interesting.
Yeah, Raiders fans showed up. There was a sea of black. Granted, we looked around Nissan Stadium. We had pretty good seats. We were right around the 35-ish yard line, about 13 rows up on the Raiders sideline. There was a lot of blue, a lot of powder blue, but there was also a lot of black. Like, there was like little specklings and like patches of black, and around us there was a lot of black. So that was fun. There was a good mixture of people. Generally, stadium food is going to be overpriced and under-deliver. Beer's always going to be like $10-11 a pop, so that's something that I just fucking suck it up if I'm gonna try and drink there. It happens. But for the most part, like the one thing that actually over-delivered even for the $10 was the nachos, because you got a huge heaping of like cheese, jalapenos, like pico de gallo, a lot of meat actually, like a lot of pulled pork and barbecue, so that was good. For the $10, it was actually probably your best bet.
Best
there.
nachos I've ever had. Like,
Yeah.
that's something you would expect to go to a sit-down restaurant and get for $10.
Yeah, no, I mean that was your best bet for sure, because everything else was like on that stretch where it's like, I know why this is priced this way, but this is definitely not worth this amount of money. But that, in my opinion, that definitely was worth the money. I think it's the belt buckle nachos or something like that.
Yeah, it was belt buckle, I believe.
Or something along
bent
those lines.
buckle.
Bent buckle.
It was
the
bent buckle.
Bent buckle. So if you ever go down to Nissan Stadium, either if you're a Titans fan, you probably know about this, or if you're like in the area and you want to go there, I would definitely recommend going to there over Paul Brown Stadium, because that is a concrete hellscape.
Yeah.
Lucas Oil Stadium is probably going to be even better than that. That's the next one in the area that I want to go to, just because it's a dome. And
I've heard the food isn't as spectacular there, though.
I know, but I won't get a hellish sunburn there.
That's
so
true. Yeah,
that'll be good.
So next time we definitely have to hit Lucas Oil. That's probably our next one, I'd say.
But yeah, I mean the Raiders fans. Not like I wasn't expecting them to come out, but I mean they came out. It was fun to see. It was fun to just get to like watch you like roam around in your environment. Derek Carr actually like came up to, not like us specifically, but to like our area, and you were like within like maybe 5 feet of the man at one point.
He is beautiful. Yeah, that's Derek Carr. His eyes are just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I looked into them, and I saw what people say they see when they die, but they come back. Like, I saw that. I think I died. My heart stopped. It was great.
So overall, I mean, just from the stadium, not talking about the game, stadium was fun. The surrounding area was decent. It was hell getting out of there, but that's to be expected with any NFL game that you actually drive to. So that's not terrible. Second best stadium I've been to. I still think the Link is better. But
You might be biased.
Slightly biased, but I also really do enjoy that they have the SEPTA there, so you can get out of the game, get on the subway, get on the trolley, and actually go down to where you need to instead of having to deal with that shit. So that's usually what I like to do, because I don't have to.
We did get stuck in a weird traffic situation. We got looped around the city in a weird way trying to get home.
It took us about an hour getting out, but I mean that's to be expected. That's not anything like to detriment of anything. That's what you get when you drive there.
To their credit, they had a very organized system to herd us out.
Oh yeah, it was much better than Cincinnati.
They were just like, all right, go this way. Now you're on your own.
Yeah, Cincinnati just kind of like pointed us in a direction. They were like, have fun.
Yeah.
So that was good. Overall, I'd say a really good experience. I will probably look whenever the Eagles do go down to Tennessee, whenever that does happen. If I'm still in the area, I'm going to try and eye that game, because it's going to be
9
fun.
out of 10 would go again.
Yeah.
It was a great experience. And I would say the same no matter who had been playing. Obviously, the Raiders getting a season opening win on the road, of all things, was great. But the stadium, the whole experience it was great. I love it. And especially if you like blondes, Nashville is the city for you.
So we're going to try and kind of talk about our stats for the week. Surprisingly, even though we did pick separate games quite a few times during the last podcast, both of us ended 9-6, not 9-7, but 9-6, because the Buccaneers Miami Dolphins game postponement debacle happened. So we're going to be
one of the biggest travesties of, by the way, the fact that happened. We didn't mention that.
What happened? The game?
That they officially postponed the game until week 11 and gave up the bye week for both teams.
I mean, the only person this is benefiting is Doug Martin. I can tell you that much right now.
Yeah.
The only person that's benefiting from this is Doug Martin, but everybody else is going to get screwed. And especially, it would have been awful, but if you would have just, and we talked about this, put it in a neutral site, put it in New Orleans, put it in Philadelphia, sell the tickets at cost, and donate some of it to charity, because you're gonna be fine making the profit that you're gonna make. You're gonna be completely okay.
It'd be a tax write-off, so why wouldn't they capitalize on that?
But in the end, it's gonna be really difficult for both of these teams who are they're definitely in the top half of the teams, good teams. So I mean, it just makes their road to the playoffs that much more difficult, and that really does suck for the fan base. It sucks for the team. It's a grind, because that mental thing where you can look forward and say, hey, we've got this week off here. These teams don't now. These teams don't, and they had to deal with the emotional and physical stress of a hurricane going through and probably ripping apart areas that some of them might have lived in or might be living in. So it's hey, you got the week off, but your shit's gonna be fucked. So have fun. So that was just overall, just not a good thing. As far as we know, Zeke is still going to play this week. Granted, it's still early, but there's been an injunction filed. They haven't done anything about it, so Zeke is still going to play.
This is the craziest thing. And I would actually be concerned as a Cowboys fan because it's possible that they could keep fighting this, and then
he gets like the last 6 games or like the last like 4 games plus any
and it
games.
goes into the playoffs. Yeah, like it could end up being a worst case scenario. Like they showed during that game that Alfred Morris, Darren McFadden can run behind that line if they let them. Like. If you're sure you're gonna win, fine. But I mean, if this is gonna turn into some bullshit and then you lose at the end of the season, like you lose way bigger. It's much better to lose somebody at the beginning of the season than the end. Trust me, seen it way too many times. Saw it last year.
Well, yeah, both of us ended up being 9-6. Records are going to be a little bit weird going forward, but all the experts' records are going to be weird going forward too. Because we're going to be doing this every time, just for comparison's sake. We're looking at like the CBS NFL experts. They pick every game. The only person that's actually on pace with us right now is Jamie Eisenberg at 9-6. Everybody else is way below us. Like Luck and Forrest at 5-10. Jared Dubin's at 4-11. Ryan Wilson's at 7-8. So I mean, the only person that's even anywhere close to keeping pace with us is going to be Jamie Eisenberg. So we're going to continue to try and outpace them and hopefully overtake them and show our superiority in the end.
Yeah, we're not getting Dave Damashek this year. We're not going to fuck around at the end of the season. We're going to actually be smart about our picks and prove that we can pick better than the professionals.
But yeah, fantasy, I probably won't continue to win because David Johnson exploded on the field, but 1-0 this week, and that's all that fucking matters right now. And so is Brandon. Brandon's actually in multiple leagues this year, but we're just going to be doing our league. But Brandon did win both of his teams.
Yeah, my other league I had 158 points. It was insane.
So no teams on bye week unless the NFL is also just going to start randomly doling out bye weeks this week. But from what we know, nobody's on bye week this week.
Yeah.
Not even Zeke.
No. Maybe Tom Brady.
So Thursday night game, Color Rush game. Surprisingly enough, like for both these teams, like you don't want to say week 2 is a must-win game, but like for both of these teams, like
they're already in a hole.
You don't want to start the season 0-1, and you definitely don't want to start the season 0-2. Thursday night, 8:25, Texans at Bengals. Tom Savage ended up getting pulled against what was a terrible showing against the Jacksonville Jaguars that both of us didn't see coming. We didn't even that was one of those things where I pulled up the league stuff and was looking at the scores as we were at the game, and I was I double taked and put the phone in your face and I was like, Jacksonville's beating them, and Jacksonville's beating them bad.
Yeah, it was a drubbing.
Luckily, Deshaun Watson did come out at the beginning of the half. He drove them down the field, ended up getting in the end zone with a touchdown toss to DeAndre Hopkins. So there was some good things to talk about, but in the end, it really wasn't good at all for the Texans. Not at all. The Jacksonville Jaguars didn't get any long runs off, but they pounded it down their throat with Leonard Fournette, and they did what they needed to do passing with Blake Bortles.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a lot to say. The team that was the number 1 defense in the league last year just got obliterated by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I feel like I owe the Jaguars a public apology. I didn't really think about this when we were making our preseason predictions, but they have a new GM and a new head coach. And I didn't think it would have that much of an effect on a completely stacked roster.
Doug Marrone said he was going to run the ball, and he was not going to let Blake Bortles... I think he said... somebody asked him, how many times do you want to have Blake Bortles throw? And he said, ideally, 0, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but he was just basically I don't want Blake Bortles throwing at all. And they went out there and they showed that. Fournette got the carries.
Right.
So
I mean, looking at this matchup now, because the Bengals also just
Bengals
got
on the other
smacked.
side got just...
so bad. Again, this is a team with an electric offense and a pretty good defense the past couple of years, and they came out with no energy, just no answers for a Ravens team that we were very skeptical about.
Andy Dalton threw 4 picks, did his best Brock Osweiler impression. I think. I don't know at this point. Like, the Dalton line was a thing now. I think he might even be below his line at this point because he keeps putting out performances like this, especially with the performance that he had last season.
Right.
Like, it starts getting to one of those things where you're like, maybe Andy Dalton's lost it. I don't know. Because this team, with the talent that they have, should not be being shut out by the Ravens. They should be able to do something. You got shut out by the Ravens.
If his interceptions had been completions to his own team, he still wouldn't have been at 60% completion. Like, that's how bad of a day he had.
Just a weird stat thing. I do think they should count as completions because you did complete the ball.
Yeah, just to the wrong team.
It's still a completion though.
AJ Green had just not a great showing, which, I mean, if your quarterback can't get the ball to people, that's pretty obvious. Giovanni Bernard only had 40 yards on the ground.
I mean, they weren't really able to get anything on the ground going just because they weren't able to get any drives going at the point where they were chucking the ball so much and he was throwing so many interceptions that they couldn't get anything on the ground. Like, Joe Mixon only ended up having 5 or 6 carries, 8 carries?
8 carries for 9 yards.
Yeah, so this was just a terrible showing for the Bengals, who I thought were going to come out and actually show something this year. But I mean, this may be the year that Marvin Lewis gets fired. One can hope. One can finally hope because I mean, they've consistently underperformed. The Bengals have done exactly nothing the past 5 years with all the talent they've had.
They don't even need to fire him. They just need to make him GM only because he's great with talent. He just isn't a good coach. Like, the players like him, but he obviously can't coach a cohesive unit of people who don't do stupid shit.
Yeah.
Like, that is not his strength. And you have this matchup now this week with the Bengals and Texans, and it actually gets to the point of, how do you pick this match? Okay, the Texans' defense is good, but are they good? Because Jacksonville just destroyed them. But Jacksonville had a lot of talent before AR-15 went down. So.
Also, Week 1 games are always kind of weird because you have way more time to prepare than other times. So that's always kind of a thing where you got to take it with a slight grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, both of those teams got handled. It's not like they lost on a last-second field goal block or anything like that.
Right.
Like, both teams come out and they got smacked.
Now, there's been word that Deshaun Watson has been gimpy the past couple days. So
he's definitely going to start. They put that word out there. I mean, it's a short week. He's starting. He's getting the nod already.
So
Tom Savage went one half of NFL football in one game before he got pulled.
Right. So all things considered, this is almost like a flip a coin kind of moment right now.
Yeah. At home still with Andy Dalton, you still got AJ Green, you still got Brandon LaFell. Like, your running game, if you can get it going, should be better. Granted, Bengals' offensive line is in tatters. Like we discussed this on our thing. It's just completely terrible. On a short week with a rookie quarterback that really doesn't understand NFL systems and has less talent on the offensive side of the ball, the Bengals should be able to win a close game. This is a game that they should be able to win. If the Texans come out and win this game with Deshaun Watson, I'm not saying Deshaun Watson is a scrub. Like, this guy can move. He's mobile. He might make some plays with his feet. But all things considered, the Bengals should come out and win this game. Like, I don't see a reason why they shouldn't. And if they don't, I think we can finally put the fork in the Bengals.
I actually am going to go with the Texans, simply because the Texans' D-line is still monstrous, and I think that they can give the Bengals the same kind of fits that the Ravens did.
If there's any reason why the Texans are going to win, it's going to be their front seven just completely annihilating the Bengals.
I'm banking on their front seven being able to make Andy Dalton his life miserable, Giovanni Bernard, Joe Mixon. Like, no run game. You're not going to run on that Texans D-line. Not if you're the Bengals, for sure. And additionally, the Texans do have a wide receiver that kind of looks like a predator. So, I mean, that's got to count for something, too. DeAndre Hopkins.
Not one of the Chris Hansen predators.
No. One of the Arnold Schwarzenegger predators.
Yeah.
Which, weirdly, now sounds kind of similar. But, anyways, I'm going to go with the Texans.
Up next, starting off the 1 o'clock games on Sunday. Browns at Ravens. This was a game that I think I might have given the Browns in my earlier preseason predictions because I didn't think the Ravens were going to be all that great. Granted, the Ravens, the way the Ravens beat the Texans, and the way the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the way the Ravens beat the Bengals, and the way the Jaguars beat the Texans were basically the same game plan. They ran it down their throat, and they passed it for minimal yards because Joe Flacco is still injured. Like they don't know what they got with him as far as that back injury, and they really don't have much on the wide receiver front anyway. I mean, like Brashad Perriman is who they got, and I mean he's been injured. So they really don't know what they have. So, I mean, all they have is an injured Danny Woodhead now because Danny Woodhead is basically out on IR again for the second year in a row, which just sucks for him. But, yeah, I mean, this is a game that historically the Cleveland Browns have lost.
Right.
And, I mean, Deshaun Kaiser's coming out, didn't have a great game. Didn't have, like, a fantastic game, but also didn't have a great game, just middling. But still kept him in it against the Steelers team that should have been a one-sided should have blown him out.
You got a team everybody's been calling a Super Bowl contender this year, and the Browns actually hung in there with them, and that begs the question: do the Browns really have the talent and coaching to hang in there with an actual contender? Or were the Steelers just underestimating them, and it was a borderline trap game?
The Steelers consistently played down to the
talent of their opponents.
It's just it's an issue that they have had since Mike Tomlin's been there. I don't know what the problem is with them.
He seems like a cocky fellow to me.
This game is so hard to call. Like I said, Joe Flacco threw about 17 times. I think that's the exact number that Blake Bortles ended up throwing. So, I mean, game plan-wise, both of them are going to look really similar. All in all, like, the Browns were able to bottle the Steelers up, and if Antonio Brown wouldn't have gone off for, like, 180 yards receiving, then they might have been able to they might have been able to actually pull this one out. So, I mean, I think this is going to be a lot closer than people were expecting. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm actually going to pick the Browns because I think that they're going to match up better than the Bengals did with the Ravens.
Right.
They might be able to stop the run. They don't really have you don't have to respect Joe Flacco at this point. Like I won't respect Joe Flacco. I don't think he can do it. I also predicted that the Browns were going to be 5-11, so they got to get some wins somewhere. And I think against the Ravens team that is basically one-dimensional on offense, right, they should be able to do something. Issue being is that their defense, it's either going to be really scary because they were able to shut out the Bengals, or the Bengals are really bad. We're not far into the season, so we don't really know where these teams lie right now. I'm not a believer. As you can tell, I'm more of a believer in the Bengals than I am the Ravens' defense, but I could definitely be wrong.
Well, we also had an interesting question would be how much of Joe Hayden's knowledge of the general scheme that the Browns run on offense may have helped the Steelers in that scenario. You know, you had a once great corner who's had a down couple of years, playing for the Steelers, but nonetheless at least familiar with the system that the Browns run on offense. There's always that question of how much does it help. It probably doesn't help much at all, but it's a question worth asking. The Browns did look promising. I mean, if you go pound for pound, stat for stat after week one, the Browns are the superior team, in this matchup. And going into this preseason, I picked the Ravens. And as much as I'm intrigued by the Browns, I'm going to stick with the Ravens on this one because I'm not a believer yet.
Up next, Bears at Buccaneers. The Bears were able to stick around in that Falcons game for way longer than they needed to. And I didn't know if it was the Falcons just needing to shake off the rust of that Super Bowl loss that they had. But that was just something that was super surprising to me. I expected that game to finish first quarter, Falcons up 14, and then just completely go from there. But if Austin Hooper didn't end up catching those two really long bombs, they might not have been in this. It took a last minute goal line stand, all 4 plays on the goal line, with Mike Glennon basically throwing into the end zone and just having drop pass after drop pass hit the ground for them to win that game, because the Bears had that game. The Bears should have won that game, which is crazy to think about, because this was one of those consensus Falcons are going to smash them. Same way we thought the Steelers were just going to completely come out and
raises the next question too. How much Mike Shanahan had to do with that offense? Right from the get-go, we make fun of the Falcons for not running in the Super Bowl, but if you look at the stats, the run game just did nothing for the Falcons against the Bears, who have been one of the offseason laughingstocks of the NFL. I mean, the passing attack, was pretty decent, And I say decent because if you look at the season that Matt Ryan just had this past year, the season that Julio Jones had this past year, it was decent at best. It could have been better, especially against the Bears. So, I mean, it's again, another question. Were the Bears better than we expected? Were the Falcons underestimating them? Did Mike Shanahan have way more to do with their success than...
Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan have more to do with their success than we initially thought? I mean, there's so many questions, there's so many curiosities about that.
More than likely, I think their offensive struggles are a combination of a new offensive system, them trying to get there, and then Super Bowl hangover. I mean, it happens. You saw the Panthers after they had that just utterly terrible loss to the Broncos. They just came out and they just shit the bed last season. So I mean, it happens. It completely happens. So I was always of the opinion that the Falcons were going to regress at least a little. New offensive system. I mean, really, like I said, the only person that really came out to play and saved them was Austin Hooper, and then he just was left wide open multiple times and had a crazy good game. But without him, you take his 128 yards away. Matt Ryan's throwing a sub 200 yard game.
Yeah.
So that's something that's definitely going to need to be looked at.
Yeah. So now this is going to be our first look at the Buccaneers this season since last week happened, or rather didn't happen, I guess you could say. Now, going into everything, we basically assumed that the Falcons are superior to the Buccaneers based on, last year, everything we saw. But, now suddenly, new offensive system again, we don't really know if that's the case. Maybe the Buccaneers will be the class of the NFC South. So the Bears are going to get round 2 of the NFC South in this week, and we're going to find out, I think, in this game if the Bears actually can compete, or if the Buccaneers just shit all over them. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Bears and the Falcons both at once, in addition to the Buccaneers being about what we expect them or more.
It's going to be an interesting game because, like I said, the hurricane situation is really gonna come into effect. I mean, this might have that truthfully might have been part of the reason why the Texans came out just so flat. That stuff doesn't just not take a toll on you. It doesn't just not take a toll on you emotionally and physically. That's something that is definitely going to be in the back of the minds of the Miami Dolphins players and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers players, is that they're going to be in Chicago. They're not going to be playing at home. So they're going to be away from their families. They're going to be away from their areas that have been affected by this hurricane, especially after not playing last week. This could be a trap game. The Bears could totally come out here and win this just because of how flat we saw the Texans play. It wouldn't surprise me if all these teams come out and lose again.
Yeah.
Just because of the issues that they've had on the home front.
And this will be interesting. This will kind of be like a revenge game for Mike Glennon, too, going back and playing the Buccaneers. So that is a factor that should be considered. Of course, then again, if he comes out and lays an egg, it'll be that question of do the fans start crying for Mitchell Trubisky? That's always the fear. And Mike Glennon has already publicly stated that he feels like he's just kind of looking over his shoulder.
He has nobody to pass to. And he kept them in that game, regardless.
Kevin White is garbage.
He kept them in that game for whatever reason, whatever needed to happen, regardless of whether it was the Falcons playing down or the Bears playing up. They were in that game for 4 downs at the end of the game with 6 yards to go. So, I mean, even if they go out and they get stomped by the Buccaneers, what were the Bears fans really expecting? You got to let the guy go out there and play. You throw Trubisky out there, you're going to get probably the same end result. So,
well, one thing people were expecting was Jordan Howard to not be able to perform, but that didn't end up being the case at all. He actually was able to go out there and put a decent performance on. That being said, the Buccaneers are just head and shoulders above the Bears on both sides of the ball, and the Falcons managed to pull it off. The Buccaneers, I think, are going to be much more consistent because they haven't had any major system changes, and their team really only got better. So I think it's easy to pencil this one in for the Bucs.
Yeah, from a football standpoint, the Buccaneers should win this game. I'm looking at it, and I think this could be a trap game for the Bears. I'm going to pick the Buccaneers, but it's one of those things where I'm looking at it, and I'm like, The Buccaneers could go out there and just lay an egg, especially.
Yeah.
So next up, Vikings at Steelers.
This is going to be a fun matchup, if only because the Vikings came out and showed us, similarly to what the Chiefs did, Kansas City came out and just beat the brakes off the Patriots. Again, Alex Smith, being in the same system for multiple years, really, really, has looked better and better. And this year they fucking opened it up, let him go deep, just the playbook was whatever. Whatever his body will physically allow him to do it. And it was terrifying. He looked like a quarterback that should have been drafted number 1 overall. Shocking, right? Since he was.
It wasn't even arguably his best game ever. This was like definitively
the best.
Sam Bradford's the best game that he has ever thrown.
The parallels are there. Sam Bradford went out and pulled an Alex Smith, which historically would sound like he was mediocre at best. But Sam Bradford came out and just kicked the dog shit out of the Saints. It wasn't even close. Sam Bradford, if you took somebody who knew nothing about the NFL, nothing about any of the players, anything, and showed them that game, they'd be like, Sam Bradford, he's like the best player ever, right? He does all the football, right? Like, he footballs better than everyone else. Sam Bradford came out and did have definitively the best game of his career. He came out and put up Alex Smith numbers. He put on an Alex Smith performance. The theme I'm rolling with here, again, Sam Bradford came out after finally being in a consistent system for multiple years and looked like somebody who should have been drafted number 1 overall. All the potential we ever saw of him coming out of Oklahoma, injuries obviously didn't help him in the NFL, but being in this system, now, like, Sam Bradford came out. And granted, the Saints defense is kind of papier-mâché.
They had Stephon Diggs on a undrafted rookie corner.
Yeah.
Like it was just...
the matchup is unfair, but Sam Bradford looked confident. He was cool, collected, in command of that offense.
Throwing the ball down the field, which is good. That's not something that you usually see from him or the Vikings offense.
Yeah, which is scary because they already have one of the best defenses in the league, one of the best offensive lines in the league, an offensive line that was able to allow Dalvin Cook to take Adrian Peterson's Vikings rookie record for an opening game by 20 yards. 127 on the ground for Dalvin Cook, good for 5.8 per attempt, which is massive. Like, just across the board. Adam Thielen had 157 yards receiving. That's insane. And he was getting deep balls, too. Like, just everything about this offense was insane. Latavius Murray came out and looked garbage, which makes me a little sad. But, I mean, Dalvin Cook more than made up for it. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs both had great games. Thielen got the yards. Stephon Diggs got yards and touchdowns. I mean, it was just... The offense was amazing. Like, I'm gushing over the Vikings right now because this is the team that I expected them to be going into this season. And if Drew Brees can't get into, like, that's the thing. Like, the one thing that keeps the Saints in every game is Drew Brees. Drew Brees can get into a shootout with anybody. And Drew Brees was not getting into a shootout with this team because the defense was too good.
It was one of those things when you look back at the game. When I was looking back at the game, I was like, I should have seen this coming because, like, Drew Brees' offense plus, like, really good defense, basically that negates each other. And what do you have? You have a defense on the Saints that has been maligned, has been terrible for years. Like, what you couldn't have expected them to turn it around. And then you have then you had an offense for the Vikings that was serviceable. And could have only gotten better. So, I mean, this outcome was only to be expected.
If I wanted to be a jerk, I would edit in the cut from me last week saying those exact words for why I was picking the Vikings.
I mean, I just... Listen, I never count Drew Brees out of a game. And
you never should. But, God, also, he looked old. For the first time ever, Drew Brees just kind of looked old.
He didn't look good.
Yeah.
He really didn't.
So, now we're going into this week... And you've got the Vikings at the Steelers, who the Steelers were somehow letting the Browns hang in there in that game, way more than they probably should have.
Granted, they're playing at home. Big Ben's home and away splits are always crazy. It's like the only player in the league that I actually trust home and away splits for because he's a completely different player home than he is away, and the whole team is a completely different team,
right?
Home and away. So
you do have the killer bees. You've got a lot on their offense. Their defense is no joke, obviously, but I mean, it's one of those things where, again, you look at the defense of the Vikings and what they're capable of doing, and you have to ask the question, does their offense have the answers for that Vikings defense? Because the Vikings offense, if they go out and are just mediocre, that might be enough for them to beat the Steelers. And the Steelers, I are a team that I've been saying Super Bowl contender. I see them in the AFC Championship this year. They're genuinely scary. They're a team that can beat anyone in the AFC.
They're a team that can outscore anybody if they're on, but never do they seem to be on and clicking all the time. And their defense is always something that is questionable because it could, like I said, like the Steelers are great when they're on, and this has been like that for a couple years. The Steelers are great when they're on, but when they're not on, they let teams like the Browns hang around, and I don't think that's something that the Vikings would do. Like the Vikings would just turn up the gas and put them down. It seems like. So, I mean, as much as I wasn't a fan of the Vikings, granted, I don't think that they're as good as you think they are. But I do think that they can go into Heinz Field and beat the Steelers. I do think it's going to be a close, highly contested game. It's really going to depend on whether or not Antonio Brown can get his way with Xavier Rhodes.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those games again this week that's going to tell us a lot. Like, I think we're going to be able to figure out a lot about how the season's going to go based on this game. If the Vikings come out there and just beat the brakes off the Steelers, the Vikings are suddenly the class of the NFC. The Packers are there, yes, great. But if the Vikings go out there and they beat the hell out of the Steelers, everyone should be paying attention to the Vikings. No one should be underestimating them. They should be right up there. Like, power rankings should have them up there. Fan rankings should have them up there. People should be concerned. Now, if they go out there and the Steelers beat the hell out of them, or if it's an even match, then, that could be easily expected. Either the Vikings got propped up by the Saints having a bad defense, or the Steelers are just as scary as we think they are. All that being said, though, I'm still going to go with the Vikings in a matchup that I don't even remember who I gave this to originally when I was doing my picks. I think I went with the Steelers.
Yeah.
Even though I'm really big on the Vikings this year. But right now I'm looking at the Vikings. I want to see Purple People Eaters 2.0.
I'm looking at this. I think I said earlier I'm going to pick the Vikings, but I can't. I can't do it. I'm going to pick the Steelers. I can't. They're too good. Like, they got TJ Watt, they got Ryan Shazier. Like, it's going to be close. It's a toss-up, but I do think the Steelers have just slightly more firepower if they're on. Granted, it's going to depend on if Le'Veon can come out and actually play. Next up, Patriots at Saints. One of the most surprising games, and we touched on this a little bit. One of the most surprising games of the week. Like, this is some game where I just kept looking at my phone as I was watching it, as I was trying to play Destiny, and I had to put the controller down at one point and just pat my head because I was like, this can't be happening.
This isn't real.
This can't be happening.
This isn't the football.
This was awful. The Patriots went out there, and I mean, going into the second half, going into the third quarter, the game was still within reach. This was still a game that anybody could have had, and they let it go. In the same way that you said Drew Brees looked old, Tom Brady did not look great out there. He didn't. He was definitely missing Julian Edelman. Eric Berry was able to lock down Rob Gronkowski, which, I mean, not a lot of people have Eric Berry-esque players out there that can just take away one of your best players. Mike Gillislee for a little bit looked like he was able to pound it in, but they missed on 2 fourth-down conversions that LeGarrette Blount may have possibly been able to get. We're not sure. And they just didn't look like they had it, which for a Bill Belichick coach team, week 1, opening day, on primetime, at home, is not something that I don't think anybody expected. And we knew the Chiefs could have come out there and they could have beat them, but this was even surprising to me with the Patriots losing like this. And we just went on about how the Saints just don't have that. They just don't have it. Adrian Peterson, and granted, they fell behind early, but Adrian Peterson basically got no carries. This is exactly what I was expecting when they picked up Adrian Peterson.
He doesn't fit their offense at all.
He doesn't. It's just not something that is good. I mean, you're taking away.
They did that cut. You could see where he was just death staring at Sean Payton. Adrian Peterson not a man known for his humbleness.
Yeah, and I mean, Mark Ingram works in this system because, like, he's a slightly less bruising runner and a slightly, like, more aggressive runner than AP, but he can catch the ball, and AP's never been a receiver out of the backfield. That's just something that never worked for him.
And he refuses to block.
So, Adrian Peterson as your main rushing back for a Saints offense is one of the worst fits that you can go into. And we talked about this, but I think this is really one of those things where you're going to want to try and feed him the ball.
Yeah.
But you can't. You don't have the amount of push on the line to do this. Like, this is a Drew Brees run team. Like, Drew Brees is going to be up there in attempts for the year. He always is. And if you're going to be worried about trying to give Adrian Peterson carries, like, you're not going to be playing to your strengths, and your strength is Drew Brees in that receiving core. Because when it comes down to it, like, you can't play the time of possession game, not with the type of defense that you're out there fielding.
No.
If you're going to have any hope of beating the Patriots, you're going to have to score 50.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a Patriots team that's going to be coming out angry.
Oh, they're going to be pissed.
Yeah.
They're going to be so angry. Like, somebody at work asked me, like, do the Saints have a chance? And I was like, no. They just lost on opening day, at home, on prime time. Like, Tom is gonna sacrifice his firstborn if he needs to.
Yeah, Tom Brady is pissed. And, I mean, also, the Patriots just got to see the Vikings put a clinic against the Saints. So, I mean...
Yeah, if the Vikings can do this, then the
Patriots can do this. And again, that's another thing. Like, if the Patriots somehow can't do that, then you know, are the Patriots falling off? I mean, is the Madden curse real?
You want it to be real, at least.
I mean, it couldn't happen to a better team.
Drew Brees has got a puncher's chance always. The Saints always have a puncher's chance because they have him. But
they're going up against a team that has a puncher's chance because they have a Thomas.
Yeah, Willie Snead is suspended for a little while, so they just don't have the kind of depth that they were looking at. Their number two.
Snead being missing is a big deal because he was a major integral part of their offense last year.
Their number 2 wide receiver right now is Ted Ginn Jr., and that's all I think you really need to know about
fast with no hands.
Yeah, what kind of team the Saints are fielding. I love the Saints. I love watching them. I love Drew Brees. I'm a big fan. I always think that they have to come out to win. I hate to watch them lose. I really do, but the Saints are going 0-2.
Yeah, they're going 0-2. That's.
I mean,
that is what it is.
Drew Brees got his ring. It just sucks that he's going to get wasted like this at the end of his career.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know, the interesting thing pointing out before we move on, Drew Brees' contract has a clause that he cannot be franchise
tagged.
And I said this, I think, last year, and I may have said it in the preseason, but Drew Brees won't be a Saint next year. I don't know if he retires, but he may chase a ring somewhere else. There could be some interesting landing spots for him, depending on how the season
Are we going to play the Tony Romo game, but with him whole season?
That's exactly what we're going to end up doing, is where is Drew Brees going to be next year?
Denver Broncos.
That is a very likely candidate, except for one thing that we will discuss when we get to the Broncos matchup.
Next up, Eagles at Chiefs. Both surprisingly 1-0 to me. I thought the Chiefs definitely were going to lose, and I'm an Eagles fan, so I'm always wary. Kirk Cousins is scary. He owned us, but I mean, we came out there and we just kicked the living dog shit out of the Redskins in their front line. It was, granted, was at the Raiders game, so I didn't get to actually watch it live. I watched replays back, and I sped through some of the game.
You were like bouncing in happiness. You're like, the Raiders are kicking ass, and they'd hold up your phone and smile at me, and I'd be like, yeah, high five, man. Your team's kicking ass too, and you don't get to see it.
Yeah, the Eagles came out there and they really gave it to the Redskins, which I think is more showing of the Redskins than it is the Eagles at this point, because I think the Redskins are going to go out and perform exactly like I thought they were, that they're going to be a subpar team.
They have one offensive threat, and that's it.
About 6-10. Jamison Crowder just didn't look good out there. Muffed a punt return. Terrell Pryor can't do it alone, apparently. And they just really weren't able to get a running game going. So the Eagles' front seven is the only thing that you really have on defense. But with the Chiefs team that came out there and just gave it to the Patriots, I don't see... I mean, the Eagles always have a punching chance.
But Ronald Darby's out.
And
the Chiefs now have a deep
and
ball.
The Chiefs have Tyreek Hill. They have Kareem Hunt, which I don't think we have anybody that can actually cover him man to man. Our front seven will have to get after Alex Smith, but he has one of the fastest release times in the NFL, and they could run quick slants on us.
And he's got wheels
all day.
He's sneaky.
So it's at Arrowhead. This is like Andy Reid versus Andy Reid light.
Yeah, it really is.
Doug Peterson's coming home to face the mentor. Protege versus mentor.
The Chiefs may be the best team in the AFC this year.
I mean, this is all like hot takes, quick takes, like really vast, like quick decisions
I've been saying this. I said it last year. I said it in the offseason. I'm saying it now. The Chiefs very well might be the best team.
The Chiefs are the real deal. I just don't know how big of a deal they are, because
it's interesting because Eric Berry shut the fuck down Gronkowski last week. Shut him down.
Eric Berry is going to be out.
Yeah.
Our receiving core is better. We do have Alshon Jeffrey. We do have Torrey Smith. Nelson Aguilar came out of his shell and was the leading wide receiver for the Eagles with 5 catches for like 86 yards.
Yeah, you got to cross your fingers that wasn't a fluke.
Zach Ertz looks fantastic. He looks like he's finally going to be able to put a full season together. But on the other end, it's one of those things where I can list all these good things about the Eagles, but the Chiefs are able to match that exactly. They got Zach Ertz. They have Travis Kelce. Yeah. We have Alshon. They have Tyreek Hill.
This is another matchup that's going to tell us a lot.
We have Darren Sproles. They have Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where they can match us pound for pound on the offensive side, and it's basically going to be a negating thing. And their defense, I do think, is more well-rounded. It's more complete than what we have. I think we do have a slightly better front seven that's going to be able to get after the quarterback. But if anything gets past that front seven, it's bombs away.
Yeah. So if you guys come out and win this game, then you guys are better than we thought. But if the Chiefs come out and win this game, we're not going to be surprised. That's all we need to say.
I think the Eagles have a puncher's chance, 15% at the max. But I do think the Chiefs come out and win. It's at Arrowhead. It's just Andy Reid has more time to prepare. This makes me really sad, because I really do think this is one of the things that we could sneak this game, but the Chiefs should win this game. Andy Reid should win this game.
Yeah.
Titans at Jaguars.
This is another interesting one. The Titans I picked to win last week. I was afraid of them.
Wrong. You were wrong.
I was afraid of them. I was afraid that the Raiders on the road, we don't do well. You know, moving to the East Coast, it's just not good for us.
I don't think I saw Marcus Mariota throw a pass longer than like 15 yards down the field at any point.
Yeah, that was about as deep as he got, if I remember correctly. It was interesting because Mariota wasn't bad at all.
There's a lot of like 3-5-step drops. Like, they really didn't drop him back and like let him go.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing is that the run game is part of the strength of the Titans. They didn't run it as much as I thought that they would, and I think that's a good sign for the front seven of the Raiders, who were getting gashed a couple times by DeMarco Murray. Like, the stats don't look as bad as it did in person, if that makes sense.
Every time it seemed like DeMarco touched the ball, it looked like he rattled off like 4 or 5, and that's the exact same thing I was saying about Marshawn. I was just like, every time he touched the ball, he looked like he'd go for 4, 5, 6, so... Yeah, I mean, looking at the tail of the tape and the way the game actually looked, how it played, you wouldn't have guessed that Marcus Mariota would have thrown 41 times. I think he would have thrown somewhere in the range of like 25.
Yeah,
and DeMarco would have
got 20. Definitely didn't see it. It was a very fast game too. Like, that game when it felt like it was over really quickly. Mariota came out and he had a very average to good game. He wasn't bad at all.
Corey Davis came out there, basically having no time in the preseason, looked really good. Rashard Matthews just kept finding holes in your guys' zone.
Right.
Delaney Walker, big body, was almost always open over the middle, had great hands. If they can get back to more of a balance, because you don't want Mariota throwing 41 times, and you don't want DeMarco Murray taking only 12 handoffs. If you can get back to more of a balance, I think this is a game that they could definitely win. Granted, we have no idea what's happening in Jacksonville right now.
Yeah, they're the most enigmatic and intriguing team in the league at this moment.
Like I said, Blake Bortles threw it 21 times, but I mean, Joe Flacco threw it 17, Bortles threw about 21. But I mean, if I would have came out and told you that Blake Bortles is going to throw it 21 times and the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win, like, you would have looked at me like I was crazy. Like, I was absolutely insane.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple things that I think are definitely worth noting about the Jacksonville stat line from last week. First and foremost, Leonard Fournette came out against the Texans' D-line, and this is the most important aspect of how that game went down.
Vince Wilfork is gone, granted, but J.J. Watt is back.
J.J. Watt is back.
Broke, like, his hand, or, like, had, like, a bone coming.
Yeah, just a compound fracture on his finger. But they've got J.J. Watt, they've got Whitney Merciless, they've got Jadeveon Clowney, They've got Brian Cushing. Like, that front seven is retardedly good. It is the best front seven in the league still. And Leonard Fournette came out there, put up 100
the
yards.
Eagles and the Chiefs want to have a word with you about that.
Yeah, they can have a word. That front seven is no joke in Houston. Leonard Fournette came out at 3.8.
And the Steelers.
And the Steelers, yes, they're good. But be real. The names I just listed, that was 4 out of 7 of those front seven people. That is a very good front seven. That is a household name front seven.
I think they're top 5 for sure.
Leonard Fournette, 100 yards on 26 attempts, 3.8 yards per carry. Chris Ivory got in on the action. Blake Bortles went out and ran 3 times for whatever reason. That's what really carried the offense, because if you look at the passing game, there was nothing there. Allen Robinson, granted, he's out for the year now with an injury. Allen Hurns led with only 42 yards. So the story of this game, dollars to donuts, I bet you, is going to be running. You know, are the Jaguars going to be able to run against the Tennessee Titans? And we saw that that Titans D-line live last week. The Raiders, with Marshawn Lynch, were able to run decently against them.
But most of that, like, he was maybe getting 2 or 3 yards before contact, and he was just like Marshawnning the rest of it. So I mean, it wasn't one of those things where where the Raiders were blowing them off the ball.
Jalen Richard basically nothing. George Atkinson basically nothing. So that front seven of the Titans was deceptively good. So this is going to be a test again for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If Leonard Fournette comes out and runs all over the Titans, maybe the Titans aren't as good as we thought, or maybe the Jaguars are much better than expected. Like, maybe they are as advertised and they're just a quarterback away. Maybe another potential spot for a Drew Brees landing. You know, if that offense and defense are as good as they looked last week, and you throw a Drew Brees on there, are they a team next year that could potentially be like a legit contender? You know, go out and try to get a ring. Who's to say? So this is a matchup that I'm very, very curious to see how it's going to play out. I originally went with the Titans winning this game just because they are the more complete team. I'm going to stick with that pick because, again, not convinced about the Jaguars yet. I told you I was soured on them for the year. I'm not going to let one game against a team with a terrible offense convince me just yet.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with the Titans if they're able to. They're able to be slightly more balanced on the ground, get DeMarco and Derrick Henry somewhere in the range of like 6 to 7 more carries. Allow Mariota to do exactly what he did and like throw a couple boots or a couple draws or something like that, and also pass exactly like he did. Maybe get him like 5 to 6 less attempts, but still the same amount of like efficiency, completion ratio, yards. I think they win this game pretty handily, but I do think the Jaguars come out and I think they might make a game of this.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. I think if the Jaguars win this game, then suddenly people are going to be looking at the Jaguars like, oh shit, maybe.
Yeah, but I don't think I think they get behind fairly early. I think they have to have Bortles throw them out of it.
Yeah.
And they just don't. It's basically going to be how the Broncos-Chargers game was on Monday, but Bortles isn't going to be able to throw them out of it like Phillip Rivers will.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to end up somewhere like 24-7, more than likely.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Next up, Cardinals-Colts. This is a game that before David Johnson's injury would have been cut, sealed, dried, easy win, Cardinals move on. But Carson Palmer went out, looked absolutely terrible. I think he actually might be done. David Johnson is out. He's injured. We don't really know what's happening with him. Carwin Williams looks like the heir apparent to take on a lot of that, a lot of those snaps. Larry Fitz is still out there making plays, but I mean, you got to have somebody to throw it to him. So I really don't know what to make of this. I mean, this is a team when I was talking with Brandon as we were watching the Rams just destroy the Colts, and I was like, the Colts could be the worst team in the league without Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
They very well could be the worst team in the league without Andrew Luck, and they could be just wasting Andrew Luck, like just completely wasting his talent.
I agree.
In Indy. It's
100%.
It's absolutely disgusting to watch what's happening in Indianapolis.
I picked the Colts last week because Aaron Donald was holding out, and I didn't know that Jared Goff was actually going to be what people thought he could be. And then he came out and
it was one of those things where I would pump the brakes on this because the Colts could the Colts very well could have the worst defense in the league.
Right. And I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. Now, granted, the Rams came out and beat the ever-living shit out of them. It wasn't even close. Like, the Colts were never in that game. The Rams could have been playing a high school team. You would not have known the difference. It was that lopsided. Now, granted, the Cardinals are not the Rams or the Colts. They still are more talented than both of those teams on both sides of the ball.
By all accounts, they should be able to, even without David Johnson, should be able to come out and at least put this team away. Like I said, like, bottom 5 teams, like, in no particular order: Colts, Jets, 49ers, Browns, and, like, Bills or something like that. So, yeah. I mean, like, Colts could be picking one for all we know without Andrew Luck, and we don't know when he's coming back.
I mean, they could pick one and then try to trade him and his giant contract away. You know, they might rebuild because they clearly aren't doing anything with him, and they don't seem to plan to do anything with him. So, I mean, who's to say? Either way, I don't have a whole lot else to say. I'm picking the Cardinals on this one, just plain and simple. Like, the Colts are terrible. The Cardinals aren't as terrible.
Yeah, the Colts, unfortunately, like, I'm saying some of these teams have a puncher's chance. Like, Drew Brees and the Saints might have a puncher's chance. The Eagles might have a puncher's chance at the Chiefs in Arrowhead. I don't see it. They're at home, and I still don't see it. I really don't. Bills at Panthers. Both of these teams actually 1-0. Granted, the Bills did beat the Jets, which is basically as close to a gimme as you can.
Yeah.
But not as gimme as the Panthers beating the 49ers.
Yeah. We learned nothing about either of these teams last week.
Other than the fact that the Bills couldn't put away a Jets team that they should have been able to put away.
This is another one I think is cut and dry. Just talent-wise, I mean, you may as well not even pull up the stats. I don't think we're going to be here long enough for this one. The Bills are in tank mode. They accidentally won that game, but between the Jets and the Bills, it was a competition to lose. Between the Panthers and the Bills, it's not the same. The Panthers are still trying to make a Super Bowl push. The Bills aren't really that team. So all things considered, I'm going to just go ahead and say the Panthers are bouncing back, and they're going to probably crush the Bills.
Surprisingly enough, I think the Bills might hang around in this. I don't think it's going to be like as bad as you're saying, you're making it out to be. LaShawn McCoy still went out there and put up 110 yards. Like, Tyrod Taylor still put up 2 touchdowns on 16 completions. Like, Jordan Matthews came out there and actually looked, halfway decent.
I forgot to mention something that was relevant to the last game and this game. The Jaguars went out and signed Christian McCaffrey's brother to replace Allen Robinson. Not replace him, but to, as depth, he'll be like their number 3. Just an interesting fact since we're on the Panthers now, who have Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually super interesting. McCaffrey got a... Between him and Jonathan Stewart, as far as, snap load, they were actually fairly close. And this is something that I didn't think was going to happen. And a lot of people were, way high on this McCaffrey thing. And then basically just left Jonathan Stewart left for dead. But still their leading rusher, still getting most of the attempts. McCaffrey's obviously going to be their, third down and, weird gadget back. But Jonathan Stewart's still out there.
Right.
And Cam, like I was saying, 6 attempts for 3 yards. I don't think he's going to be running like he should. And he only ended up throwing 171 yards. Granted, did get into the end zone twice, one to Jonathan Stewart, and then another to Russell Shepard. So that's good. But I'm sorry, no, one to Russell Shepard, and then another one to Jonathan Stewart. Yeah, that's what I said. I thought I read Kelvin Benjamin, and I was like, he didn't have a touchdown.
He wasn't even there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a lot closer than you think it's going to be. I'm actually going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to pick the Bills, just because, like I said...
Hot take!
Despite me also believing that the Bills are in tank mode, I think that they have too much talent, at least leftover talent, this year, to be as bad as we think.
You think they might accidentally win the game?
I think they might be, they might accidentally fall into some games. LaShawn McCoy's still really good. Jordan Matthews is a serviceable wide receiver. Tyrod Taylor, they run that read option with him. It's going to open up some passing lanes. They do have some residual defensive talent from Rex Ryan. And the Panthers didn't impress me against a team that they should have been able to put away easily. So this is a team where I think that the Bills might be able to come back and actually win.
Well, that'll be interesting.
Jets at the Raiders.
It's a Raiders game, and I want to talk a lot, but I'm not going. The Raiders, just fucking Jets. Come on, man. Like, Jets have nothing. The Raiders came out and just convincingly. Well, I say convincingly.
Pretty convincingly.
Our kicker was responsible for 14 of our points. So, I mean, only 12 of the points are between our offense and defense combined, and obviously all 12 of those were from our offense. So, not saying that by any means the Raiders are bad. No, they're a good team. But the Raiders, they had to actually earn that win against the Titans, and the Jets just got beat by the Bills. Jets are fighting for that first pick. They want nothing more than that first pick. Woody Johnson died for this. So, Raiders are going to beat the Jets. I don't need to talk about them anymore today.
Yeah, just a fun little tidbit. I'm also going to go with the Raiders, but as we were leaving Nissan Stadium, I was looking at the schedule, and I was like, oh, you guys got a fun week next week. You got the Jets. And I looked at our schedule, and I was like, oh, yeah, we have the Chiefs. Shit. So that's kind of how I feel about this game.
Yep.
Dolphins at Chargers. What very well could be the NFL football podcast Madden Matchup of the Week on the Towers Underground YouTube page.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? Because we haven't seen the Dolphins at all, and the Chargers were definitely in that game at the very end, despite running the ball on like 60 straight plays, it seemed. So this is super interesting. We haven't got to see Jay Cutler in the Adam Gase offense. Jay Cutler possibly could have the best weapons that he's had in his career.
Yeah.
With Devontae Parker and Jarvis Landry and Jay Ajayi. And the Chargers were able to put up 14 quick points on the no-fly zone. Granted, sans TJ Ward. But they were able to put it in there. And Melvin Gordon, I thought he was going to fall off after last year.
Right.
Looks just as good as ever. The only thing that I would really be worried about is, like I said, with the Buccaneers maybe coming out and having a real issue. Granted, the Buccaneers are playing at home, so I don't know if they're going to necessarily want to lay that egg because they're going to want to be playing for their fans. But the Dolphins, I think this could be a trap game for them.
So I'm super excited. Like I cannot express how excited I am. When we were doing the poll, because we were like, which 4 teams do we put on the poll? And I was like, Dolphins, Chargers, Dolphins, Chargers, Dolphins, Chargers. Like, I want that matchup so bad. I really wanted us to be able to play that specific matchup. I thought it was going to be the most even matchup out of all of the matchups this week. I thought it'd be the funnest one to play. I'm super excited for this game. The Chargers came out, and I expected them to beat the Broncos. Unfortunately, they didn't, and I'll get into that more when we talk about the Broncos here in a little bit. The Chargers, they had a rough go of it, and we don't know what to expect because we haven't seen the Dolphins play. I still do think that the Chargers are a good team. However, John Pagano leaving seems to have had some impact on their defense. Their defense wasn't as tight and threatening as it was last year. This was a healthy Chargers team that just couldn't put it together to try to win against the Broncos.
Yeah, Simeon was out there doing his best Michael Vick impression and actually making him work for it.
Yeah. So I mean, all things considered, we've seen what the Chargers can do, and I was less than impressed, and I was high on the Dolphins, as you know, going into this. So I'm actually I'm assuming the Dolphins are going to come out and have the weirdest record in the league this year.
Go Charge, go! I don't know what to expect for the Dolphins. I don't know if I necessarily pick on them. I never been a big fan of Jay Cutler. The gunslingerness is not something that I'm really a big fan of. I think he's going to throw them out of more games. He's going to throw them in. Chargers do got to get a better handle, and Anthony Lynn he's a running backs coach. He's a first year head coach. He's got to get a better handle on what he's doing with his offense.
Yeah,
they ran it way too much, way too often, and basically got lucky on a couple broken.
Yeah, when you got Phillip Rivers and those offensive weapons, you really need to be throwing.
It's like they were trying to lose the game. Hopefully, the Chargers learn from this. They were able to be in the game against a really good. Still probably really good Denver team, Denver defense.
I think you hit the nail on the head, too, because you got to remember, Anthony Lynn was a running backs coach.
Yeah.
And he got promoted from running backs coach to head coach. And the very biggest problem they have in their first outing is they ran the ball too much. So, I mean,
they ran the ball well. They ran the ball really, really well.
They did it too much.
Offensive, defensive balance. We talked about it with the Titans. Like, you gotta have some balance. Eagles, same thing. Gotta have the balance. Like, you gotta have the balance.
Yep.
The Chargers come out there and they can be balanced. That defense is still really good. I think that the defense on the Chargers is slightly better than what the Dolphins are going to field. I don't know what's going to happen with Cutler. I think Cutler's going to come out there and throw two picks, put them in easy field position. They're away. They're probably going to be slightly affected by that hurricane. I think this is a trap game for the Dolphins in which they lose. Chargers win. 49ers at Seahawks. 4 years ago, this would have been a great game. Not so much today. Both surprisingly 0-1. Maybe not so much surprisingly on one end, because the 49ers are, trying to beat the Colts and the Jets to the bottom, apparently.
Yeah. I already said all I needed to say about this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, Seahawks at home. The 49ers don't beat them. The Rams will get like one game against them that they'll play really tightly, but the 49ers just don't have it.
No.
They just don't have the talent to do it. They weren't able to keep up with a Panthers team that did not impress me against them.
Yeah.
So the Seahawks are going to come out there and they're going to
lock this one.
Lock this one in.
Lock this one. This is the lock. This is definitely the lock.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go back. My upset's definitely gonna be Browns at Ravens.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just lock this one in. This one's gonna be pretty simple.
Oh yeah.
You can also lock in the Raiders if you guys want to do that one
Yeah,
too.
that's also a lock.
Redskins at Rams. I think this is an interesting one because like both of these.
Who
this is like the upset. This is the. I don't know. I mean, like we got to look at the actual plus minus for this game.
Yeah.
But. The theme for this episode is it's too early in the season. Mm-hmm. We don't know what these teams are.
We don't want to hype too much, but some are obvious and some are interesting and then some are just confusing. And this one could be confusing.
I think the Redskins are going to be bad. I think the Rams beat up on a really bad team. I think the Rams are like at best a 7-9 team, and same thing with the Redskins. I think the Redskins and the Rams are in that same area. Redskins just being slightly more talented on offense. With the Rams just being slightly more talented on defense. I think it's basically a wash on that end. If you look at the stats from each game, like obviously one's going to be inflated because the Rams took back 2 picks.
Yeah, it's like 45 points I think they scored that game, or 48.
They scored an exorbitant amount of points. And the Redskins unfortunately weren't able to get really anything going against the Eagles. So they're going to be playing 2 games, actually, funny enough. 2 games in LA at the same time. I want to look at this just from like an attendance standpoint. I think this will be really funny, really interesting. Despite all of that, I do think I am going to go with the Redskins. I really don't have much of a reason why, other than the fact that I don't think Kirk Cousins is as bad as he came out and played. Mm-hmm. I think Terrell Pryor's going to bounce back a little bit, and I do think that the whipping that the Rams put on the Colts wasn't legit. It was a fluke. Yeah,
I'm going to take the Redskins on this one because I am still a semi-believer in them, and I still love Terrell Pryor.
Cowboys at Broncos also was one of the possible games in our Twitter poll at Towers Underground on Twitter.
I think we're both glad that one's not winning.
I'm super happy because I was going to have to shoot you to kill me.
Yeah.
Or kill me to shoot you, whatever way that we needed to do this.
Yeah, but neither of us wanted to do that.
This, I think this is actually America's game of the week.
Yeah.
Which mean that Joe Buck is actually going to be doing the commentating on this. Is he? I don't know.
I looked while we were recording it. They still haven't released the schedule.
Yeah, that's what sucks about doing this early. But yeah, don't lock it in, but I'm pretty sure Joe Buck's going to be doing this because Troy Aikman can't do not Cowboys games at 4:25 in the afternoon. But this looks to be one of the more interesting matchups of the week, especially since both of them came out and we got about what we expected from both teams. Unlike a lot of the other teams where we're like, hey, I don't know what happened here. What's going on with this? This might have been a little bit fluky. We don't know. I got about what I expected out of the Cowboys, and I got about what I expected out of the Broncos. Maybe slightly more offensive production, but I got about what I expected, to tell you the truth. So I mean, when you really put it down there, if Zeke's playing, this team rolls.
He was scary outside the tackles.
Yeah,
that's what did it for me. I'm a Zeke believer because everyone always says, well, of course he looks good. He's running behind that O-line. Anyone can run behind that line. He, in that game, Sunday night, was outside the tackles just killing it on multiple plays. He didn't need the O-line. Like, he could... Whatever Zeke wanted to do, he had his way. It seems like a trend in his life, that he just has his way with people. That being said... while I did pick the Chargers against the Broncos, I've also been a Trevor Siemian believer. You've heard me say it before. I think Trevor Siemian is better than people give him credit for. He passes the eye test for me, and he came out and looked really, really good against the Chargers. This is another very, very close matchup. I don't know what to expect from this. However, the Chargers and Cowboys are actually kind of similar teams. And the Broncos were able to handle the Chargers. So I wouldn't be surprised if that Broncos defense is able to expose the Cowboys, because they still have arguably I don't even think it's arguably, they have the best secondary in the NFL.
Yeah.
On the Broncos. They've passed the
at
Seahawks
least one
at
of the
this
best
point.
secondaries.
Yeah, you could question maybe the Seahawks still have the best secondary. I think it could vary from day to day. But if any team is going to possibly expose the Cowboys right now, the Broncos have a very good chance, just because Simeon came out and looked really good, and their defense is obviously still scary. Going into the season, when I looked at this, I picked the Cowboys. I am flipping now, and I'm picking the Broncos.
The Chargers were able to do what they wanted to do basically on the ground the whole game. It was only when they started opening it up through the air that they were able to do it. Granted, you got Dak Prescott back there, and I am obviously not a Dak Prescott believer. Averaged only 6.9 yards a pass. I mean, granted, he's throwing it more downfield, which is great, but and this really doesn't matter. This isn't a really valid argument. But without Zeke, I do think he gets exposed. Granted, they're going to have to shut down Zeke. I really don't know what to think about this game. I want the Broncos to win. For my sake, not really for yours.
Yeah, we're both at odds with this one.
I do think that the Broncos are a slightly more complete team, just because the Giants just looked completely awful. Odell Beckham was a late game scratch. You got turnstiles for offensive line people there. So you really didn't get a real test of what I think the Cowboys could do. They're going to be facing a real team here. If they're able to hold Zeke to 75 yards, I think they win this game.
Yeah, that's fair. Sunday Night Football, the one that going into the season, this is another one that we were like, oh man, penciled this in. This is going to be an amazing game. Now, there might be a question mark around it. Packers at Falcons. Packers, obviously, they came out, they looked about how we expected them to look.
Yeah.
I kind of underestimated them. I think I picked the Seahawks last week, and the Packers won. Even though I picked the Packers to win, go to the Super Bowl this year, I do crazy things sometimes. Falcons, like we said earlier, they just didn't look like the Falcons of last year. Maybe they'll get it together. Maybe they won't. We don't know. This is going to be at their shiny new stadium.
Yeah.
So they're, I don't know what their noise funneling system is like in this new stadium. Maybe Mercedes hooked them up with some new tech. But this is a very interesting game because these are teams who have had high-flying offenses with, the actual better defense being the Falcons' defense. So, on paper...
Statistically, the Falcons had a better defense last year, and they should have a better defense this year. But the Packers were able to they were just all over the Seahawks. And I mean, the Seahawks don't have that great of an offensive line, but Russell Wilson was finding nobody. He was finding 0 people to pass to. And they couldn't get anything going on the ground. I mean, this very well could be the best Packers team that they've fielded since they've won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Montgomery, he didn't have the best game, but he looked like in better circumstances. Like the front 7 of the Seahawks is no joke. Like, it's a very good front. The defense of the Seahawks, we all know, that is a great defense. Ty Montgomery would probably have run all over most other defenses.
He ran very well between the tackles, and you wouldn't think of it averaging only 2.8 yards per carry on 18 attempts for 54 yards. But, I mean, you wouldn't think that, but just one of those eye test versus stats kind of a thing where he was running very well, and the Packers were more than committed to trying to get something going on the ground to at least get the Seahawks to think about respecting the run.
Yeah. Jordy was everything you'd expect from him. He had one of his, I wouldn't say weaker games, but, the split between him and Randall Cobb, you expected one of them to have 100 yards in most games. And this is the Seahawks they played last week. So ultimately, they still both had fantastic games, for what they had to deal with. The Falcons, I mean, I don't know how I feel about their defense just yet, given how the Bears actually kind of hung in there with them.
Yeah, they were able to... They were hang in there. They were able to basically have their way with him.
So the question marks are huge there. Now, this is going to be at home for the Falcons, and if you had asked me, 2 weeks ago, I would have picked the Falcons just alone on home field advantage. After week 1, I'm kind of thinking Packers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that the Falcons won at home in the playoffs last year. I do think that they've lost some of the magic. I do think that they're experienced some of the slump. I do think that they're still trying to acclimate to that new system that they're running. Granted, if there's a dynamic offense that can expose the Packers, it could be the Falcons. So I'm gonna roll with just on a hope and a prayer. I'm gonna roll with the Falcons just because during my preseason predictions I had them being a little bit better than the Packers. And I do think that win was slightly fluky just because the Seahawks are always kind of weird away. Yeah. So, granted, going into the season, we're going to see a lot more of this. Last game of the week, we have Lions at Giants. It's going to be our Monday night game.
I'm really excited for this one. I've been high on the Lions. High on the Lions. That's my pun for the week. High on Lions.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
By all accounts, just based on the way that each team played last week, the Cowboys, the Giants shouldn't even be in this.
Right.
Odell Beckham being a late game scratch really isn't a good reason as to why they lost. If your offense rolls through one person, you've got more issues.
It raises a really good question because the Giants swept the Cowboys last year. The Cowboys did objectively get worse in the offseason. And the only real thing that got worse for the Giants going into this matchup was Odell Beckham being missing.
Yeah.
So is Odell Beckham the sole reason they were able to sweep the Cowboys, a team that went to the NFC Championship last year? Because if that's the case, then Odell Beckham's one of the greatest of all time. And if that's not the case, then the Giants are much worse than we thought. And that seems a lot more realistic than one wide receiver making that big of a difference in a game.
Cowboys lost the divisional round to the Packers. But
sorry, that's right. They got close. They got really close. That's right. So, by all accounts, I mean, Eli Manning has never been super impressive. Their offense looked weak. The Lions' defense, I'm a fan. Their offense is great. They just gave all that money to Matt Stafford, and I think they're going to have to capitalize in the next year or two because those cap hits are going to hurt. But after seeing the Giants last week, I have no question, and I think Sean McDonough and John Gruden are going to agree when they talk about this on Monday night. I'll tell you what, this Matthew Stafford kid, he's one heck of a football player. He's going to sling it all night long. The Giants just aren't going to have answers. They're going to try to rush that man, but they're not going to be able to stop him. Matthew Stafford, he's going to be hitting Golden Tate all night long. That defense just isn't going to be able to do anything. And the Giants, who are they going to throw to? Xavier Rhodes is going to be out there locking down any deep ball that Eli Manning ever hopes to throw. Lions are going to crush the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, even if the Giants come out and play a great game defensively, lock down what could be a really good receiving group, one of the better receiving groups with the Lions, with Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., Golden Tate, they're just not going to have enough firepower to do what they need to do. They've got, like I said, turnstiles across the board for offensive linemen. Anybody can get a pass rush on them. Eli Manning, even if he can get the ball out 45 times in 1.5 seconds, it's just not going to be enough. It's just not going to be enough. They don't have a running game. You don't have to respect their running game, which means you can press and bump their receivers. ODB, despite maybe playing this game, is still obviously going to be injured. Those ankle and leg injuries for him are super important because he's a much more shifty wide receiver than, say, like an Antonio Brown or a Julio Jones. So I don't see there being any way that the Giants win this game. I really don't.
Yeah, so I think we can both pretty much agree then that the Lions are going to win this game. So now we are going to have to do our official coin flip for who's going to play who. The final poll results as of this recording, we have the Dolphins at the Chargers for our Madden matchup of the week. So I'm about to flip the coin. Rob, do you want to call it while it's in the air?
I called it last week.
Okay, so I'll call it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and flip. Tails, and it is heads. So who are you picking?
Find out on the Madden matchup.
Check us out on YouTube.